This is Big Ideas from the ABC.
Now, I'm going to just take a minute. My name is Stuart Rees. I'm one of the people responsible for the work of the Sydney Peace Foundation, which, as you probably know, awards this country's only international prize for peace. I'm going to take just a minute to foreshadow what's going to happen in the next hour and a half. When I invite Dr. Shiva to the stage in a minute, I'm going to explain to her and to you how the jury works and why and how she was chosen to receive the Peace Prize this year. After Vandana has given her address, the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Councillor Clover Moore MP, will come to the stage and thank Vandana. And that's incredibly significant because this is the City of Sydney Peace Prize lecture. Peace, in our view, is not owned by anyone, but it's owned by everyone. It's certainly not owned by any one institution, but it's highly significant that this major cosmopolitan city, through its leadership, should give its important support to this country's only international prize for peace. And then the Lord Mayor will welcome to the stage, to finish off the evening, the wonderful Australian Aboriginal soprano Deborah Cheetham and her accompanist Tony Lalage. You're in for another special treat. Deborah will explain her choice of songs when she gets to the stage. Now, will you please join me in welcoming Dr. Vandana Shiva to the stage. About a year and a half ago, 7 men and women from diverse walks of life received the nominations, which, because we've been going for over 12 years, come from all over the world. About 18 months ago, we had 23 nominations. We abide by 3 criteria. The first is about commitment to global peace with justice. We are very interested in peace, but we are 100 times more interested in peace with justice. And that elastic criteria enables us to address issues such as the continued oppression of the indigenous people of West Papua, the appalling human rights abuses continuing in Sri Lanka, and of course the continuing, unfortunately, cruelty towards the Palestinians. We would also include, of course, the struggle for reconciliation and justice for our own indigenous people. The second criterion concerns evidence of commitment to universal human rights, and the third criteria is about the use of the philosophy and language and practice of non-violence. During the course of the deliberations, when you spend 3 months scratching your heads and reading a lot of documents, a theme emerges usually that reflects what is going on socially and economically and culturally in the country at the time. And during our deliberations last year, of course, the issue of global warming was emerging as a major issue, but also, of course, somehow the return of the Flat Earth Society and politicians' lack of courage, with a few exceptions, and a lack of vision about how to respond to the issue of global warming. So almost inevitably, given that theme about commitment to the sustainability of the environment and the preservation of precious resources, the name of this distinguished Indian physicist and environmental activist came to the fore, and it was the unanimous vote of the jury that Dr. Vandana Shiva should receive the 2010 Peace Prize. And the citation, Vandana says that it is for your courageous leadership of movements for justice, the empowerment of women, the protection of farms and farmers in small communities, and for your scientific analysis of environmental sustainability. It's now my great pleasure to invite you to give the 2010 City of Sydney Peace Prize lecture.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you to the City of Sydney, to the jury that provided me this honor, the honor to join an amazing group of people in making further contributions to both human rights, justice, and earth rights. For me, earth rights have been my inspiration since I started my work in the very, very early days as a volunteer in the Chipko movement. And I've increasingly started to feel, especially in recent years, that the issue of ecological destruction, whether it be climate chaos, whether it be the disappearance of species, whether it be the water crisis, which you face here and we face intensely in India, every dimension of the ecological crisis is, in fact, the leftover ruins of a war against the earth. The biggest war taking place on the planet, which globalization has made truly global. No place is safe, no ecosystem is safe, no communities are safe. This war has its roots in an economy which fails to respect ecological and ethical limits, limits to inequality, limits to injustice, limits to greed, and to economic concentration. And even though both ecology and economy have their common roots in the word oikos, which means home, our planet, this beautiful earth, the global corporate economy has declared a permanent war on the very earth that provides all the resources that make the economy run. The means are instruments of war, both economic and technological. They are weapons of mass destruction being used to kill millions in peacetime by robbing them of their food and water, by poisoning the web of life, by violating the constitutional rights that protect the life of people, their livelihoods, and their human rights. This war also reflects a permanent war in a paradigm and worldview which defines the entire world and all the species as enemy. It's an inevitable next step in an economy based on greed, where a handful of corporations and a handful of powerful countries seek to control the Earth's resources and to transform the planet into a supermarket in which everything is for sale. They want to sell our water, our genes, our cells, our organs, our knowledge, our cultures, and even our future. Every vital living resource on the planet that maintains the fragile web of life is in the process of being privatized, commodified, and appropriated by corporations. The continuing wars in Afghanistan, the war that doesn't stop in Iraq, other lesser talked about wars, are not only about blood for oil. As they unfold, we will see they are about blood for land. The issue of land grab in Africa, the issue of land grab in India is already taking lives. It's blood for food, blood for genes and biodiversity, and blood for water. Water is often called the blue oil. Biodiversity is often called the green oil. Oil has become a metaphor and organizing principle for all resources in a world of corporate globalization. And wars and militarization are the essential instruments of control over these vital resources, especially because people rise to defend the earth. People rise to defend their rights. Militarization becomes a shield for this takeover of resources. Whether it's the homeland security in the US or the green hunt in India, these are the militarized takeover of the resources of the poor by the powerful. And the images of war against the earth are all around us. Most recently, the red mud flooding through the streets of Hungary, affecting 7,000 citizens, killing 9, was just one more example. And as I watched those images of the red mud, I really thought, this is the blood of the earth, because the red mud came from an alumina smelter. Aluminium production begins with bauxite. Usually bauxite mountains are rich in water, rich in biodiversity. I've seen this when I was invited by the tribals of the Niyamgiri Hills. Niyamgiri means the mountain that upholds the universal law. And this mountain, too, had been identified for mining bauxite. All the clearances had been granted to Vedanta, a UK-based company owned by an Indian. The aluminium plant has already started, and you have red mud plants. 1 million tons of making of alumina, 1 million tons of making of toxic sludge, the red mud. It takes an equivalent amount of waste creation, and that waste creation requires huge amounts of water. For every ton of aluminium, 1,200 tons of water are used. For every ton of aluminium, 250 kilowatt tons of electricity are used. And to smelt aluminium, and smelting of aluminium requires another 13,500 kilowatt tons of energy, emitting an average of 13 tons of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. If these costs were internalized, bauxite mining, aluminium smelters would not be economic. They would not be able to be presented as development. It would be more economic to leave the minerals in the mountains. And this is exactly what happened, because the movements that started with the local tribals in 2006 in those mountains of Orissa became a national movement, a global movement, and earlier this year we took a pledge that we were not going to allow our government to use military forces in the name of containing the Naxalites and the Maoists to actually launch a war against the tribals to empty out mineral-rich areas for mining. We held public hearings, we brought out documentation, this triggered government setting up committees, and finally in August, all clearances for the Vedanta bauxite mine in Niyamgiri were withdrawn. It shows once more the power of people. In 1982, I was asked by our Ministry of Environment to look at the impact of mining in Doone Valley. At that time, I was working in Bangalore, and of course, I jumped to do the study because Doone Valley is my home. I was born in Dehradun, and now I'm living there. And we did the study on the impact of limestone mining, led by the women whose water resources were disappearing. We realized that the biggest contribution of limestone was providing water, just as the biggest contribution of bauxite in the Niyamgiri Hills is providing water. 32 streams and a number of rivers started in Niyamgiri. Every tributary of Doone Valley that joins the mighty Ganga and Yamuna starts in our limestone hills. When we did the calculation, we could show to the courts and to the government that the revenues the government was collecting by allowing the limestone to be mined was insignificant compared to the contribution of water to agriculture, to people's lives. And the first case ever in India that was fought on an ecological issue where commerce was pitted against the integrity of ecosystems and the rights of people was a victory for ecology and people, because the Supreme Court in 1983 ruled that if commerce starts to undermine life support, then commerce must stop because life has to carry on. And everywhere where this kind of rape is taking place, the damages are the same, and people have the same response. That is why the Papua New Guinea mines in Oktedi, which were Rio Tinto mines, and BHP Billiton was trying to buy up Rio Tinto, they were forced to be closed in 2002 after a very sustained struggle of indigenous people. And there's a lot of debate, I realized, since I arrived in Sydney, about the water crisis in the Murray-Darling Basin. I've also realized that a large part of the crisis is related to coal mining. I found out that citizens refer to what's happening as coal mining on steroids. I read an article about coal companies stealing our rivers, exactly what our communities say. And in the tribal state of Jharkhand, which means the forest state, tribals have stopped 52 coal companies from coming in for mining. For 4 years, they've stopped any investment in coal. And yet, not only are your coal companies mining the basin, Gujarat NRE, which was introduced to me by a filmmaker this morning, has a huge mine. 24 million tons is what they want to mine, and they want to set up a totally new expansion of their private port. I went to understand who is Gujarat NRE, because in India we've never heard of them. NRE stands for Natural Resource and Environment, if you please. And its director, Arun Kumar Jagatramba, gave a presentation to your governments. And this is what the presentation says. With coal, we have light, strength, power, wealth, and civilization. Without coal, we have darkness, weakness, and barbarism. Where does this kind of hubris come from? Where does this kind of blindness pretend to be enlightenment, bringing the light? I believe the war against the earth begins in the minds of men. And I mean men. Especially men who control power and capital. Its seeds were sown when the living earth was transformed into dead matter to facilitate the raw material grab for the Industrial Revolution. Reductionism replaced holism. Monocultures replaced diversity and complexity. Raw material replaced a living, vibrant earth. Terra Madre became Terra Nullius. According to Bacon, who is called the father of modern science, you cannot know nature merely by exerting a gentle guidance over nature's course. Of course, the indigenous people realized gentle guidance and a quiet dialogue is all it takes. He said, we have to have the power to conquer and subdue her, to shake her to her very foundations. He talked about the new mechanical philosophy as giving birth to a masculine birth of time. And all holistic knowledge, knowledge of interconnectedness, knowledge of mutuality, was defined as effeminate and feminine. There was this dream to create superheroes and supermen. And the Royal Society, which was born of that vision, repeatedly the secretaries would say that the objective is to know the ways of captivating nature and making her subserve our purposes, thereby achieving the empire of man over nature. Robert Boyle, the governor of the New England Company, who was also responsible for Boyle's equation, attacked the perception of indigenous people, the Native Americans, of nature as a kind of goddess, and argued that the veneration wherewith men are imbued for what they call nature has been discouraging impediment to the empire of man over inferior creatures of God. It's only by getting rid of a sacred earth, by getting rid of our sense of being equal to other species, was it possible to begin the war against the earth in the name of progress. As Caroline Merchant has pointed out, this transformation of nature from a living, nurturing mother to dead, manipulable matter was eminently suited to the exploitation imperative of a growing capitalism. The nurturing earth image acted as a cultural constraint on exploitation of nature. One does not readily slay a mother, dig her entrails, or mutilate her body. We have a very, very beautiful prayer, probably the most ancient hymn written about the sacredness of the earth, which is in our ancient text, Atharva Veda. And this is the Prithvi Sutra, the poem to the earth, which says, "What I dig of you, O earth, may that grow quickly upon you. O pure one, may my thrust never pierce thy vital points, thy heart." And cultures that are deeply aware of a living earth cannot violate her, cannot unleash a war against her. That's what the Australian indigenous people have done over centuries. Excluding these amazing ways of knowing of women, of indigenous people, especially our grandmothers, is actually leading to a serious reduction of the human capacity, including the human mind and the human brain. It's making us more vulnerable to respond to the ecological crisis. And what is worse is this obsolete, mechanistic philosophy is becoming blind to the best of emerging science, whether it be the science of quantum theory that says nothing is separable. There is no deterministic quality in the universe. Everything is fluid, everything's changing, there's uncertainty, but most importantly, there's interconnection. Or the new biology of self-organization, of emergence, of epigenetics, showing that the idea of thinking of life as a machine, of living systems as mechanical artifacts, is very primitive, very crude thinking, and we should be studying this very fast. Making peace with the earth must begin in our minds by creating more rich ways of thinking about the earth and inhabiting her in peace. It involves an inclusion of biodiversity of knowledge systems, of the knowledge systems of everyone who has been excluded. And just as much as we need biodiversity of species, we need the diversity of cultures, of languages, of ways of perceiving the world. We need this because the blindness of mechanical reductionist thought is constantly projecting as abundance systems that are creating scarcity. And nowhere is this more evident than in agriculture, where agriculture has become literally an everyday war against species, against farmers, against the land, and even against those who eat by assaulting our bodies. 1 billion people are hungry, but 2 billion people are suffering diseases related to bad eating, obesity, diabetes, hypertension. And the roots of industrial agriculture are in war. I realized this when I couldn't understand in 1984 why the land of Punjab, the land of prosperity, which became the land of the Green Revolution, which was given a Nobel Peace Prize, had become a land of war. 30,000 people were killed in the extremist violence of the late 70s and the early 80s. till in 1984, the sacred shrine, the Golden Temple, had to be invaded by the Indian Army through an operation called Operation Blue Star. And in that same year, we had the worst industrial disaster in Bhopal, where 3,000 people were killed in one night, 30,000 have died since then, and hundreds of thousands have been maimed for life, including the maiming of future generations. So I studied what was the Green Revolution and wrote my book, The Violence of the Green Revolution. I realized the reason pesticides killed people in Bhopal was because pesticides were meant to kill. They were war chemicals which were reoriented to agriculture after the wars. Fertilizers were really surplus production after the wars ended and were produced from the same factories that manufactured explosives. And it's interesting that whether it be the Oklahoma bombing or it be so many of the bombs in Afghanistan today, they're all fertilizer bombs where the fertilizers are going back to the original use of those factories, which was to make explosives. Herbicides, Agent Orange, sprayed on Vietnam, is a very, very popular way of killing weeds. And the names of herbicides tell you how those who produce them and sell them are thinking of a war in agriculture. Monsanto's herbicides are called Roundup, Machete, Lasso. American Home Products, which is bought up by Monsanto, calls its herbicides Pentagon, Prowl, Scepter, Squadron, Cadre, Lightning, Assert, Avenge. This is not the language of war or sustainability. This is the language of war and sustainability. It hardly sounds like a method of producing the food that should be nourishing our bodies. The Green Revolution has been sold as a miracle which increased food production. However, all that we produced more of was rice and wheat with huge doses of chemicals, huge capital intensity, and irrigation that was 10 times more to produce the same amount of food than ecological agriculture would require. But one of the things that was never ever counted in the Green Revolution was the destruction of food. A sustainable system needs diversity, and India's agriculture always grew cereals and grains with pulses and oilseeds. The pulses were wiped out. The oilseeds were wiped out. Today, they have become India's major imports. And Australia is part of the export. What is worse is there is now plans to grab land in Africa to grow pulses and oilseeds. President Obama is visiting India very soon. One of the issues that he will be asking India to engage in under a US-India agriculture agreement is to jointly invade Africa's farmlands. The biggest land grab taking place today in the name of food security, in the name of energy security, is the land grab in Africa. The US will provide the funding. Indian companies will provide the Trojan horse. There was a recent article in the Time magazine that talked about the fact that organic cannot feed the world because it is land greedy. But when you think of the fact that the Amazon forest is being cut down for soya beans, Australia is having to grow pulses for India that we grew for ourselves if we grew food efficiently, not inefficiently in the form of the monocultures of rice and wheat. Africa has to now grow pulses and oilseeds for India. This is the ultimate expansion of land grab. This is not a land conservation technology. And that's why so much of the work that we've been doing in India through Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, and it also means the new gift, is to provide alternatives to agriculture as war, to create a non-violent farming system. This has become more important because the second generation of the Green Revolution, which is genetic engineering, is even more violent. It is now creating war at the level of the genes. It is gene warfare. You can either create genetic engineering through using a gene gun or using a plant cancer. One is a physical weapon, the other is a biological weapon. Unfortunately, both are creating a disturbance in the metabolism of the plant, and there is so much research now and so much evidence that instead of controlling pests and controlling weeds, genetically engineered herbicide-resistant crops and Bt toxin crops are actually creating superweeds and superpests to the extent that Monsanto is now paying farmers in the United States $6 an acre to buy other company herbicides to destroy the superweeds that have been created by Roundup-resistant soya. In India, the Bt crops in cotton increased the use of pesticide 13-fold. And because the Bt was also claimed as an intellectual property by Monsanto, they collected royalties, made the seeds costly. From 5 rupees, the costs per kilogram of cottonseed jumped to 3,600, of which 2,400 was royalty payment. That means 10 billion rupees going out of India to finance Monsanto's super profits. The combination of high-cost seed, high-cost chemicals got farmers into a debt trap. Debt has then led to suicides. In a decade, we have lost 200,000 farmers in India. This is a genocide. It is not suicides. We've done public hearings again and again. And at one public hearing in a gurdwara, in a temple in Punjab, 2,000 widows were sitting, and I was in the jury. And one after the other, Gurjeet came to talk about how Budh Singh, her husband, had drunk pesticide to end his life, how Baljit Kaur's husband Tayal Singh, Karamjit's husband Bhola Singh, Manjit Kaur's husband Sundar Singh. How many names do I read to you? 2,000 in that one temple in one state, 200,000 across the country, and I am told even Australia is witnessing farmer suicides because of the totally unreasonable economy, a negative economy that has been imposed on the farmers across the world in the name of increasing food production and in the name of increasing farm incomes. But not only are farmers dying, not only is biodiversity being pushed to extinction, not only is water being wasted and abused and polluted, industrial agriculture has a huge contribution to climate change. At least 40% of the damages caused by greenhouse gases are coming from either the nitrogen fertilizers, the methane emitted by industrial farming, factory farming, or the carbon dioxide from long-distance unnecessary movement of food, and the use of fossil fuels. All of this is eventually not producing food security. Instead, what is given us is climate chaos, not in the future. It's given us climate chaos today. This year, Pakistan had floods. Indus is not a flood-prone river. 2,000 people died. The flood-prone river is the Ganges. In eastern India, which should have had rain, we had no rain. In western India, we had such heavy rain that the entire northern Ganges plain was flooded. And in the desert region of the high-altitude Ladakh, which never gets rain, not a drop of rain, they get snow in winter, 200 people were washed away because of flash floods. Everywhere, the climate is not secure anymore. And all that the old fossilized mindset is giving us is an extension of the war against the earth by a few more years. drilling under the ocean, where BP created the oil spill that has cost $40 billion in terms of damages. Or the new idea of geoengineering the planet, creating artificial volcanoes, putting giant pipes in the ocean to pump up cold water because the ocean surface is warming, pumping sulfates in the stratosphere to block the sunlight, putting reflectors in the sky to reflect the sunlight as if the sun was the problem. And of course, there's this pretense that genetic engineering will invent salt-tolerant, flood-tolerant seeds, drought-tolerant seeds. Well, nature's already invented them. Farmers have already selected and improved them. We have these seeds in our community seed banks. All that the corporations are doing is engaging in yet more biopiracy, like they did in the case of the neem, the basmati, the wheat. 3 cases we fought and won. We are committed to defending life, seeds, and knowledge as our commons. It is not the intellectual property of Monsanto. It was never invented by them. And I celebrate the fact that the US, which spent so much time trying to introduce patents on life and patents on genes, in a recent case brought by a woman against the patent on the breast cancer gene, the US government has said that these are not inventions, they are a product of nature and therefore not a subject matter of invention. This reversal, I believe, is the beginning of the reversal of the error of treating life as an invention and appropriating it for super profits. We now need to continue the work that we started to stop the patenting of seeds, to stop the patenting of life on Earth. These cannot be enclosed. The recovery of the commons is one of the very, very vital aspects of making peace with the earth. And this will become more important as the last commons start to get enclosed. Most of the poor people in the world, especially women, live in what I call a biodiversity economy. Their energy, their food, their water is all provided by the conservation of biodiversity. And as so much of our work in Navdanya has shown, biodiversity actually produces more food. Our farms have more nutrition per acre, more food per acre, more incomes for farmers per acre. It is not true that toxics and chemicals produce food, they produce poison. What produces food is biodiversity. And the more we intensify biodiversity by conserving it, the more we intensify ecological processes by maintaining them, the more food we have. Fossil fuel intensive and toxic intensive agriculture is not improving the nutritional status of people. But now there's an attempt to commodify the remaining biodiversity. 76% of this biodiversity is in the commons. It's used either by nature to maintain her ecological cycles, or it is used by people to provide their basic needs. There is now an attempt to turn this into a corporate green economy. And there's a convergence of power, just like the chemical industry became the pharmaceutical industry and became the biotech industry and the seed industry in the very same way. Today, the new bioimperialism, seeing a convergence of BP, Shell, Total, Exxon, Cargill, ADM, DuPont, BASF, Weyerhaeuser, and Syngenta, to appropriate the 76% of biodiversity of this planet that serves the people. That is why there is no separation between the rights of the earth and the rights of people. Pitting humans against the earth and placing them outside the earth is an outmoded, fossilized legacy of capitalist patriarchy and mechanistic thought that gave us fossil fuel-based industrialism and colonialism and is now imposing militarized growth on communities worldwide. We must reawaken our duties to protect the earth and our rights as Earth citizens to a fair share of her gifts. For this, we need to revisit so many of the basic false assumptions that make the old paradigm run. One of the false assumptions, of course, is growth, which only measures commodification. It cannot measure the amazing services ecosystems provide. It is unable to measure the work women do, the work small businesses do, the work tiny communities in forests and along the coasts perform to provide food security. We need to create new measures beyond money, economies beyond the global supermarket, to rejuvenate real wealth and authentic well-being. The mountain state of Bhutan, which has invited me to help them make a transition to 100% organic, has got rid of the idea of gross domestic product. What they measure is gross national happiness as an official indicator. Ecuador has introduced the rights of nature in its constitution, and the people of the Andes have resurrected sumac cauce, good living, in place of this misleading idea of growth where a few individuals and a few corporations accumulate the wealth of the planet while impoverishing both the earth and communities. And in India, our Bhumi movement is working with local communities to protect the rights of the earth and the rights of the people against the new land grab taking place because of the spread of mining, the spread of special economic zones, the spread of factories intended only for exporting steel, exporting cars. We need a new paradigm for living on the earth because the old one is clearly not working. And the alternatives needed not only at the level of tiny shifts in tools, it is needed at the level of our worldview. How do we look at ourselves in this world? What are humans for? Are we merely a money-making machine and a resource-guzzling machine? Or do we have a higher purpose and a higher end? I believe we do. I believe our first identity is that of being citizens of this earth, members of the earth community, of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, an ancient Indian concept. I have given the name Earth Democracy for the recognition of the rights of all species and the rights of all people to share and conserve the gifts the earth has given us. This is making peace with the earth. This is real ahimsa. This is non-violence. And the rights of the earth are very intimately intertwined with the rights of people. On Earth Day 2010, the president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, released a new draft declaration on the rights of Mother Earth, which we hope, and I'm part of the core group that's working, both in taking this to the United Nations as well as it moving it through communities in civil society so that we have a document on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we also have another document on the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth. Defending the rights of Mother Earth is therefore the most important human rights and social justice struggle of our times. It is the broadest peace movement that we can be engaging in. And I would like to thank you with an ancient peace prayer from India. May there be peace with space and the skies, peace with the atmosphere, peace with the waters. May there be peace with the earth. May there be peace with the herbs, the plants, the trees. May all divine beings pervade peace. May the peace that pervades all creation be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Hello, everyone. If you're wondering why I'm travelling in this motorcade, it's because I've fractured my fibula. And I'll be like for the next few weeks. So I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of our land, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. The City of Sydney is proud to support the Sydney Peace Prize as a reflection of the values we want our city to represent: open, diverse and tolerant. A city which welcomes the world and which supports justice, especially for the marginalised and the powerless. We explicitly recognise global warming as a century's great challenge at the international, the national and the local level. And we further recognise that while global warming affects us all, its burden falls disproportionately on those who have done least to cause it. Dr. Shiva's address this evening has been an inspiring reminder of our obligation to redress the imbalance, to respect and, as she said, to make peace with the earth, to shift from reckless exploitation to a new paradigm of working with nature and building a more just world. As she has pointed out, by protecting biodiversity, we not only protect the livelihood of farmers, but we can actually produce more food more sustainably. The old carbon economy is fast approaching its dead end, and we now have the opportunity to rethink the way we occupy this precious planet and to reimagine the way we live, work and do business. Cities, which now house more than half the world's population, can be powerful agents for change, not only building green and sustainable economies, but building social capital and social justice. In this century, cities talk to cities, sharing knowledge, talent and ideas. And the cities of the Asia-Pacific region are in many ways leading the way to a sustainable future. At the City of Sydney, we are committed to ensuring that includes a socially sustainable future, one that is based on tolerance and compassion, but also on social justice. On behalf of the city and of all of us who are here this evening, I thank Dr. Shiva for her inspiring address and reminding us of the necessity of a new compact with nature, and for showing us that it can and must be achieved. It's been inspiring, an inspiring address from the 2010 Sydney Peace Prize laureate. Please thank Dr. Shiva.
This is Big Ideas from the ABC.